There have been a slew of developments with Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz' pressure that he's facing in this federal probe to sex trafficking. But one place where you wouldn't hear about it at all as a news viewer would actually be on Fox News. Gaetz has not been on the network since the widely panned interview he did with Tucker Carlson that Fox called so weird. And by one count, the Gaetz investigation has been mentioned on Fox just 7 times. Here's why that's particularly striking. Gaetz is well known to their audience. It's newsworthy to hear about developments of someone who's well known in the news. In fact, Gaetz even rose to prominence primarily because of those many, many appearances you see on the screen on Fox News. Since August 2017, he's appeared a whopping 313 times, and out of those, 121 were on Hannity. I mean, that means he's on there all the time. And Hannity went further. This is something that almost no one does in media, including even, in fairness, most people who work for Fox News. Hannity went out and actively electorally campaigned for Gaetz, which is not the kind of thing anchors or journalists do. This was at a 2018 rally in Florida where the two men praised each other profusely.
I got to thank Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity gives me a platform almost every night to get out there and tell it like it is. And I thank him for that.
It's this young Mickey Mantle over here. And it's your next governor over there. They are the ones fighting the hardest for the president. And I'm very thankful to both of you for what you do every day, which is why it's an honor to share the stage with both of you.
You almost can't tell who's benefiting who. And it was within a year or so that Hannity was privately giving Gaetz advice on managing a different crisis, one where he was actually facing an ethics investigation. And that probe focused on whether Gaetz was tweeting overly threatening messages at Trump fixer Michael Cohen, whether it constituted witness intimidation. But Hannity, who we just showed you, was so quick to discuss Gaetz, to campaign for him, to, as Gaetz put it, have him on his show almost every night. Well, Sean Hannity hasn't mentioned Gaetz once since all this became public, this investigation. Again, as mentioned, as for the underlying charges, Gaetz denies any wrongdoing. We're joined now by our friend Jason Johnson. Jason, it's quite a turnaround.
Yeah. Matt Gaetz has lost a lot of friends. And I think, Ari, like, this is a good setup because we got to contextualize this. It started with Matt Gaetz losing all of his friends in the Republican Party, which is what makes him even less popular on Fox, right? Like the Republicans who came forward and defended Jim Jordan after his sex scandal, none of those people have come forward for him. Katie Hill, who Matt Gaetz defended at one point, she has not come forward for him. We just heard earlier today that Joel Greenberg, his potentially partner in crime, is now working with the feds. Look, if Gaetz isn't careful, he's going to wind up buried next to someone else, right? Because he's going to get in trouble for this because too many people don't like him and he no longer has a megaphone to cover it up anymore.
Yeah, and you mentioned whether or not Greenberg will cooperate. I have mixed feelings about the second Drake quote in one program, but the other was by a guest. So, seeing what you do for fame, what would you do for freedom? And that's one thing facing the Greenberg situation without reporting yet on whether or not he cooperates. With regard to the strange relationship with Hannity, I want to just put up for viewers another thing that came to light with how tightly they just see themselves as on a team, at least until the probe became public. Hannity giving Gaetz this private advice over text, pull it down and say what you said, it'll pass, about this tweet about Cohen that was potentially witness intimidation. And then Gaetz just asking straight up, how long should I lay low? And Hannity says, just a while, right. Maybe send a note to Michael privately. I mean, this is quite a level of detail of two people who admit to be teammates. And yet what Gaetz seems to be learning the hard way, Jason, is that Hannity, like Trump, is gone the moment the heat arrives.
Oh, yes. These are very transactional relationships between the Republican Party and Fox. And that's why it was also very telling. The moment the scandal came out, remember, Gaetz was like, well, I got jobs lined up. And suddenly Fox News was like, yeah, we don't know you. We haven't talked to you. We haven't had any formal conversations. There are too many politicians right now, whether it's Gates or Boebert or Sarah Palin a couple years ago, who think that, well, if I'm not actually doing my job, if I get in trouble in a scandal, I can just have Fox cover for me. And it doesn't work that way anymore. There's a certain disgust that even Fox News may have if you get in too much trouble. Maybe you could get away with being a Roy Moore or a Larry Craig, 3 to 5 years ago, but you can't do that anymore. And Gates, who has alienated so many different kinds of people by being accused of being a snitch, by not necessarily being careful with his words, by trying to throw Tucker Carlson under the bus, these are all things that make him radioactive, even for Fox News, who seems to want to defend anybody under any circumstances.
Yeah, you make some really politically precise points there, which are important, Jason, that Fox basically turned on Gates and just gave him a full new phone who dis, which isn't what you always want to hear when you thought they were your buddy. Jason, thank you as always. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.